It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello and welcome to the Happy Families Podcast. Today, something different on the pod. Now and then, I'm invited onto other people's podcasts to talk about topics of interest. And recently, in fact, just last week, an episode dropped on The Parenting Couch with Rachel Chappell and Sarah Levitt. They do a really great job. It's a fun podcast to listen to, The Parenting Couch. We talked about bullying. And we haven't done that here on the Happy Families Podcast for quite a while. We're usually talking about social media dramas and all that kind of thing. The Parenting Couch with Rachel and Sarah, though, a conversation about bullying. It was so important that I wanted to bring you a snippet of what we discussed. Our conversation went for about 45 minutes, 50 minutes. I'm just going to share an edited version of that, but you might want to pop over to the Parenting Couch and listen to the whole thing. The link is in the show notes. We started our conversation about bullying with some definitions and types of bullying that our kids can encounter. Please enjoy my conversation with Sarah and Rachel from the Parenting Couch.
A good place to start is to get, I guess, a definition or your way of defining what bullying actually is, because there's obviously a bit of teasing. You know, you and I teased each other at the beginning of this. So I don't think that was bullying, but it would be good to get your take on that before we, get started more on the subject.
Yeah. So most people agree on the definition, and it's really important to get this right because sometimes parents will say, my child is being bullied. And they're not being bullied. Someone was mean to them. So you can have someone being mean and cruel and unkind and all those things. That's not necessarily bullying. These one-off instances or these occasional someone poked fun or had a bit of a jab, that's unkindness. It's still not okay. It's disrespectful. It's not okay. But bullying it has quite a specific definition. And across most organizations and throughout academia worldwide, this is a generally agreed on definition. I say generally because there's always one or two academics who want to get really, really fussy about things. But the general agreement around bullying is this. Bullying is repeated and intentional use of words or actions against someone or against a group of people because you want to hurt them. So you're trying to cause distress, you're trying to risk their well-being. Usually we divide it into 4 different types of bullying. There's physical bullying. That's obviously the hitting and the pushing and the shoving and the intimidating and the ripping someone's bags off their shoulders and chucking them on the bag and on the ground and kicking it. There's verbal bullying, which can also be written. So I guess just the use of words. So it's name calling, it's insulting someone. I mean, you've got kids who are, say, neurodivergent and they get called more names. Or back when I was a kid, I don't know that this happens anymore. Maybe it does, and I'm just too old and too far away from it now. But when I was a kid going through primary school, I remember kids that wore glasses were literally called four eyes, and that was a denigrating insult. Kids that were carrying too much weight would be teased incessantly about it. And so that's that verbal kind of bullying. Then you've got social bullying, which is essentially ostracism. When you're deliberately excluding someone, when you're spreading rumors, when you're sharing information and gossiping with an expectation that you are going to cause a harmful effect on the other person. You're going to cause reputational damage. You're going to impact the ability that they have to be accepted socially. So there are social costs. And then the last one, cyberbullying, which is pretty much any of the above and more that could happen online or via a mobile device. That's how we define bullying. Sorry, that was a long definition. I hope that's okay.
No, but it's important.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I guess what sparked this particular conversation between Sarah and I, like we realized we haven't done an episode on bullying. And my question is, first of all, how can we open up the conversation with our children? Because they might not necessarily, they might be ashamed about it. They might be embarrassed. And if you do find out, what steps do you need to take to protect your child? Do you go to the parent? Do you go to the teacher? Do you go to the school? How do you handle it?
Let's say that you just want to check in with your child. I'm an ambassador for Are You OK Day. And Are You OK Day happens on a specific day every year, but the message that they really promote is it's Are You OK Day every day. We've got to be just checking in and asking those questions. Now, here's something curious. The more you ask people how they're doing, the more they realize that they're not doing that well most of the time. Like we all have moments where we're awesome and then we're not, and our emotions are like waves. They come in and they go out, and we have one emotion, then we have another one, and every single one of them is going to be different. Nevertheless, when we say to our kids, how you doing? Is everything okay? That can feel a little bit targeted. It can feel like it's a little bit much. If you're in a family where you're lucky enough to have beautiful, open, generous, sharing relationships, happy days, but unfortunately too many families don't have those relationships. So I've got a couple of recommendations. The first one is there are going to be a few moments every day where you can get your child at a time where they are open, when they are relaxed and when they're willing to talk. And I reckon you guys could tell me those times because you would have them with your kids. It's usually late at night when they're about to go to bed and you're laying down.
Yeah.
I mean, they just...
Well, when she was little.
The kids open up, and if you can have those check-ins reasonably regularly, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, maybe once a fortnight, where there's downtime. A good mate of mine, unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. He was about 50 years old and he just died way too early from a heart attack. But he used to sit on the couch. Rob would sit on the couch in the living room because he knew the kids would walk through the living room and see him there. And he would not be watching TV and he would not be reading a book or the paper and he would not be staring at a phone.
Wow.
He'd just be sitting on the couch. And he described it to me. He just said invariably the kids will walk through the living room and they'll say, "Oh, hey, Dad, what you doing?" And he'll say, "I'm just sitting on the couch." And they would come and sit down with him because I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you don't seem to have a whole lot going on, the kids, they gravitate to you. The more targeted thing that you can do once the relationship feels good. I mean, here's the thing. Kids spell love T-I-M-E. And just like dollars are the currency of our economy, connection is the currency of our relationships. And so when our kids feel connected, they feel seen, heard, and valued, that's when you can start asking some deeper questions if you feel a need. So you might say something like, "Hey, I listened to a podcast the other day, Rachel and Sarah and the Parenting Couch. They're my favorite people to listen to. And they had this chat with this guy and he was talking about bullying. Do you see much of that happening at school? Like because every school's got it. Do you see much of it? And you need to be that direct. Every school has got it. I don't know a single school in the country that doesn't have some bullying at some point. And so you just say, every school's got it. How much do you see? Does it happen much at your school? And you start really wide. Does it happen much at your school? Does it happen much in your grade? Like, is there a bunch of kids that are sort of more likely to bully than others, or is everyone pretty chill? And then you might say, what about in your friendship group? Does it happen much there? Has it ever happened to you? And so you can see how I've started really wide. And so the kids are feeling comfortable talking generally. And then bit by bit, as the conversation moves along, you finally get to them. And ideally, in a perfect world, if trust has been established and they're enjoying the smoothie, they'll say, "Yeah, actually, something did happen to me a couple of weeks ago." And that's the bit where you jump across the table, grab them by the collar and say, "Why didn't you tell me?" No, you don't really do that.
I thought you were going to say grab them and wrap them up in bubble wrap and don't let them out again.
Never let them leave the house
It's
again.
2024, so we've got to be very careful these days. We've got to bubble wrap our kids. And so it's this very gentle conversation where we're inviting them in, we're just chatting with them about things, and we get closer and closer and closer. Rachel, I guess the other, to sort of wrap up this part of the question that you asked, the other thing that I really like to do and encourage is to say to kids something like, what would you do if you saw someone, like just a random at school, bullying another kid? What would you do? Because there's all this talk about being an upstander, not a bystander. Would you actually have the guts to step in? Like, what if it was a boy doing it to another boy? And I don't know, let's say your child's in grade 4 and this bully is in grade 6, for example. What would you do then? Like, because it's really hard to be an upstander and say to a grade 6 boy, "Stop it," when you're only in grade 3 and he's twice your size. How do you deal with that? And by asking the kids that, a couple of really interesting things happen. Number one, it gives them the opportunity to pause and think, because we're always lecturing them. And they start to figure stuff out. They start to figure out what kind of a person they are. They also get a bit of a dry run. Like, they get to practice safely with you in the living room or on the couch before it really does happen. So they can go, yeah, this is what I think I would do. And when they give an answer, you can say, I don't know, let's say your grade 3 boy says, "Well, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for the last 3 months and I think that I could take their kneecaps out." And you might say, "Well, I guess that's one option. How might that go?" And do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to tell them that they're wrong. You can get really creative with this and say, "Well, let's explore that further. How does that help? What are the risks? What other options are there?" And so we kind of get to play around with ideas with them until they start to zero in on a response.
So you've found out that your child has been bullied and they've opened up to you, and you've used the techniques that you've suggested. What next? I mean, obviously it might vary, depend on if it's a young primary school or if it's a high school. Do you go to do you speak to the school about it? What if you're actually really good friends with the parent? Sorry, I'm actually diverging and adding extra questions, but if you know that you actually know the parent, do you send them a message on Facebook, or how do you handle this?
No,
because you're the big mama bear and you want to look after your child and they're so sad.
Yeah. So the first thing that you've got to do is regulate. Just get yourself under control. If you go all mama bear or papa bear, if you start blowing up, then you're just going to start bullying everybody else, and it gets really, really messy. As a general rule, I don't encourage parents to contact other parents and make an accusation that your child's bullying my child. It rarely goes well. It's really, really unlikely. Now, if you've got evidence, let's say there's some video footage, or let's say you've got some text messages or some Insta chat content or whatever. If you've got evidence and you've got a relationship with these people, then it may in some cases, and I really want to put big flashing lights around it may in some cases be appropriate to contact them. I'll share a personal example here. One of my daughters was having a text chat on whatever platform it was, maybe 8 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. I think she and the boys she was talking to, I think they were in about grade 8, maybe grade 9. And he made some inappropriate comments, and then he made some inappropriate solicitations. Really, really quite explicit, and really and my daughter was like, hang on, aren't we friends? Like, I thought we knew each other. We've known each other since primary school, and now you're putting this on me. Like, she was shocked. And she came straight out to me and Kylie and said, can you just have a look at this? I'm not quite sure what to do. So from that point of view, we were really grateful, right? Here's a child who's willing to talk to us about a challenging situation. So I took the screenshots, and because I knew those parents, and I didn't know them well, but I knew them well enough. And so I sent them a text message and I said, hi, let's say it was Rachel. Hi, Rachel. It's Justin Coulson here. Something's just come up tonight involving our kids that's a little bit tricky. And I wanted to bring you in on it, but it is pretty sensitive. Is now a good time? And so by framing it that way and by not blaming anybody, but just saying there's something going on between our kids, it's a little bit tricky. I wanted to bring you in. Is that okay? And I got an instant response. Absolutely. Yeah. What is it that you want to talk? Do you want to talk or text? How do you want to do this? And I said to them, I'm going to send you a couple of screenshots from my daughter's phone. Once you've had a look at them, if you just want to come back to me and tell me what you think would be best in terms of how we proceed. And so what I'm doing here is I'm really kind of just putting it on them and saying, I'm concerned. What do you think? So I sent the screenshots through. The screenshots spoke for themselves. I didn't need to do anything else. And this is the other thing, right? When you've got evidence, when it's incontrovertible, you're on pretty sure footing. And that's why I felt confident that in some circumstances like this, I could get away with it. They came back to me and they said, we're horrified. We're dealing with it. We'll be in touch. And about a week later, they told us about the conversations. They actually asked if they could get some more advice because they knew who I was and what I did. So that ended up being helpful. And as much as
you don't want to get on the wrong side of it.
Well, that'll cost you. It'll be this much per hour.
And those parents were wonderful. And then I was able to talk to them about, well, here's your next conversation and your next conversation. And that was the end of the relationship that my daughter had with their son. That was, it broke her trust.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, they had some good learnings together, and he saw the ramifications of it. So a long way of saying my general recommendation is don't contact the parents, but in some circumstances, such as those where there is incontrovertible evidence and you can ask them what they think the next steps should be.
Perfect.
Framing it the right way, that's helpful.
Yeah.
In terms of other situations, like let's say you're in a situation where you don't know the parents or you don't have evidence of what's going on and you're just trying to protect your child. This is one of those things where the severity of what's occurring, the regularity and consistency of what's occurring, the resources that you have available, all of these things will play a part, okay? if there's ongoing bullying, not that we're trying to entrap other kids here, but if there's ongoing bullying, then you want to be able to find evidence. And so you want to ask your child, how can we get some evidence here? I would recommend, if it's happening at school or if it's happening at whatever the sports activity is that you do in the afternoon, or maybe you've got a church group or something, whatever it is that you do, wherever it's happening, there is value in talking to the other adults, talking to the people who have some level of accountability here. That is useful. However, once again, I strongly discourage those adults, those leaders, those teachers, whoever they are, stepping in and saying, right, well, I'll fix this now, because all that happens is we're pushed underground. Instead, a concerted effort where there are quiet conversations tend to be much more helpful. So maybe the school teacher sits down and tries to understand the context and explores, explains, and empowers. Maybe there are some minor adjustments that can be made at school so that your child feels safe and those bullies are in a different place now, whether it's changing classes or mixing up timetables or whatever. Coming up with constructive solutions will always be the preference. Then again, if you have really serious cases of bullying, you've got situations where children's mental health is absolutely getting hammered, where there's physical harm, violence, threats, those kinds of things, then intervention is necessary. As a parent, you've got one central job, and that is to protect your kids. I'm not saying that to throw any shade on families where tragedy has occurred. I'm not saying they didn't protect their kids. What I'm saying is you just do whatever you got to do.
Every situation is so different and unique, and you've been amazing as always, and we are so grateful to have you on once again, and we will be getting you back as we've talked about. But this is such a big subject. It's very on topic, of course, at the moment. I think it always has been, but I think now, obviously, with social media and other things, it is just rife. And, you know, what you've just said, and to have this conversation is really, really important. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, I love hanging out with you guys. I wish we had more time. This was fun. That's just a sneak peek of a much longer conversation that I had with Rachel and Sarah from the Parenting Couch. You can find more about their podcast in the show notes. Please click and go over and have a listen to the whole thing. Thanks so much for listening, though. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. If you want more information about making your family happier, send us your questions, happyfamilies.com.au, or visit us at our website and social media pages, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families.